I have lived 100 years, and the most shameful thing I ever did was nothing. Not a crime. Not a betrayal. Not a lie. Just nothing. Day after day, decade after decade, I said nothing, showed nothing, gave nothing of what was real inside me. And the woman who deserved it most stood 3 feet away from me every morning for 51 years, pouring my coffee, asking how I slept, and I answered with a grunt and opened the newspaper. She is gone 11 years now. And I am still here, which is the cruelest joke God ever told. I want to tell you something that will cost you nothing to hear but everything to ignore. I am not a philosopher. I am not a priest. I am a man who was born in 1924 in a small house with 4 brothers and a father who never once, not once in his entire life, told my mother he loved her out loud. I thought that was how men were built. I thought silence was dignity. I thought showing up was enough. I was wrong for 51 years. And I have had 11 more years alone to count exactly how wrong I was. If you are younger than me and everyone reading this is, then you still have what I do not. Time. Not much of it, maybe. But some. And some is everything. Here is what I know that you do not yet: love does not die in explosions. It does not end in screaming matches or slammed doors or dramatic betrayals. It dies the way a candle dies in a closed room, slowly, quietly, while you are looking somewhere else. And by the time you smell the smoke, the light is already gone. My name is not important. What I did with my name, that is the story. Margaret was 22 when I married her. I was 24. It was 1948, June, a Saturday. The church was small, the dress was borrowed from her cousin, and the flowers were wildflowers she picked herself from the field behind her mother's house the morning of the wedding. I remember thinking she looked beautiful. I remember thinking it clearly, feeling it in my chest like something warm and solid. I never told her. Not that day. Not that week. Not in the 51 years that followed. I told myself it was understood. That she knew. That a man who comes home every evening, who fixes the roof, who puts food on the table, that such a man has said everything worth saying. I built that logic carefully, the way you build a wall, brick by brick, and I hid behind it for half a century. There was a moment. 1963. Our daughter Anna was 7, our son Peter was 4. It was a Tuesday in November, the kind of gray Tuesday that has no beginning and no end. Margaret had spent the day cooking. I know this because I could smell it when I came through the door, something with onions and bay leaves that filled the whole house. She had set the table properly. Candles. The good plates. I remember looking at it and thinking she must have invited someone. I actually looked around for a guest. "Who is coming?" I asked. She looked at me for a moment. Just looked, her hands were folded in front of her apron. "No one," she said. "I just wanted it to be nice." I sat down. I ate. I said the food was good. Then I went to read in the other room. She cleared the table alone. Blew out the candles alone. I did not think about it again for 40 years. But she did. I know she did, because of what she said to me near the end, the thing I have turned over in my mind every single day for 11 years like a stone you cannot stop touching. She remembered that Tuesday. She had kept it, stored it somewhere inside her, that small ruined evening with the good plates and the candles and the husband who looked around for a guest. I did not understand that women remember everything you made them feel small about. Not out of spite. Out of love. Because it mattered to her. Because she had wanted something that evening, not diamonds, not a declaration just for me to notice. To see that she had tried. And I had looked around the room for someone else. There were other moments. Hundreds of them. In 1967 I discovered Margaret had been writing poetry for years. A notebook with a dark blue cover she kept in her nightstand drawer. Our daughter mentioned it at dinner. I looked at Margaret. She was looking at her plate. "You write poems?" I asked. "Sometimes," she said. "For a long time now." I said something like, "That's nice." I went back to eating. I never asked to read one. Not that evening. Not in the 37 years she continued writing after that dinner. I found 14 notebooks after she died, stacked neatly in a box in the back of the wardrobe. 14. I have read every page now, sometimes sitting with one poem for an hour because I cannot move past it. She was extraordinary. She wrote about the garden, about the children, about loneliness, a particular kind of loneliness I now understand completely because I live inside it every day. She wrote about me too. Not with bitterness. With a longing so quiet and so patient it is almost unbearable to read. In 1972, our 24th year of marriage, the house full of life, our son playing football on Saturdays, she wrote a question directed at no one and everyone. The question was essentially, does he see me? He did not. I did not. Not then. In 1981 I was offered a promotion that required significant travel. 2 weeks out of every 6, sometimes more. I told Margaret at dinner on a Wednesday. She asked how much travel. I told her. She nodded, asked if I was happy about it, said she was glad for me. That was the entire conversation. What I learned years later from a letter she wrote to her sister Helen, which Helen gave me after the funeral, was that those 2 weeks every month nearly broke her. Not because she could not manage. She was capable of managing anything. But she was 45 years old and lonely in a way she could not name to me, and 2 more weeks of empty rooms felt like a sentence rather than a sacrifice. She never said this to me, because, as she wrote to Helen, he would feel guilty, and then he would be irritable about feeling guilty, and I do not have the energy for that. So I will just manage. I read that sentence for the first time at 89 years old, sitting at the kitchen table where she used to pour my coffee, and I put the letter down and sat there for a very long time. She had protected me from the consequences of my own absence. She adjusted. She swallowed the hurt so I would not feel uncomfortable. And I mistook her silence for contentment, her endurance for happiness, her patience for proof that everything was fine. Everything was not fine. Everything had not been fine for a very long time. Then November 2012. She was already ill. The diagnosis had come 8 months earlier. She was at home, still herself, still sharp, still Margaret, just slower and thinner and tired in a way sleep no longer fixed. It was an evening. We were sitting in the living room. The television was off, which was unusual. We were simply sitting in the quiet together, which we had almost never done in 51 years of marriage, and it felt strange, and also I remember this clearly like something I should have done 10,000 times before. She was looking at the window. There was nothing outside, just the dark reflection of the room in the glass. She was looking at her own reflection without seeming to see it. Then she said it. Not loudly. Not with accusation. In the voice she used when she was saying something she had thought about carefully and finally decided to release. You know what I used to wish for? Not trips, not jewelry, not any of that. I used to wish that just once you would come home, and before you did anything else, before you put down your bag, before you took off your coat, you would look at me and say something true. Just something real. About me. About what I meant to you. She paused. I used to stand in the kitchen listening for your key in the door, she said. Every evening for years. And I would think maybe today he will come in and just say it. She turned from the window and looked at me. I stopped listening for it after a while. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because I don't want to leave without you knowing that I wanted it. That it mattered. That I was there, waiting, for a very long time. I could not speak. I want to tell you that I found the words that 50 years of silence had buried inside me and I gave them to her right then. But my throat had closed. My chest had closed. 88 years old and I was sitting across from my dying wife and I could not speak because no one had ever taught me how and I had never taught myself, and now the bill for that particular failure had come due at the worst possible moment. I took her hand. She let me hold it. After a long moment she said, quietly, almost to herself, "It's all right. I know you loved me. I always knew." That sentence, it should have been a comfort. She meant it as one. But I have turned it over for 11 years now and what I hear in it is not reassurance. It is the sound of a woman who loved a man so completely that she did his work for him. She convinced herself. She translated his silence into love because the alternative that the silence was simply silence was too heavy to carry. She did my work for me. Right to the end. I want to give you a name for what I did. Not taking for granted that phrase is too soft, it slides off the mind without leaving a mark. What I did has a more precise name. I practiced emotional cowardice dressed up as strength. Not stoicism. Not masculinity. Not the way of my generation, those are excuses, and I have had 11 years of silence to strip every excuse down to its bones. Underneath was fear. Simple, ordinary fear. Fear that if I said what I felt, something would become real and therefore vulnerable. If I told her she was the only good thing I had built in my life, I could lose her. If I told her that her face was the first thing I looked for in any room, I was admitting I needed her. And needing someone felt, to the man I was, like standing on ice. So I said nothing. And called it stability. Here is what I know now: silence is not neutral. Every time you choose not to say the true thing, you are saying something else. You are saying, "This moment does not deserve my honesty." And the other person receives that not as silence, but as a message. They fill the silence with the most available explanation, and the most available explanation is almost never the generous one. Margaret filled my silences for 51 years. With patience, with assumption, with the quiet heroism of a woman who decided to believe she was loved even when the proof was thin. She carried what I would not carry. She translated what I would not say. And I let her do that work alone for half a century. So here is the one thing I can give you. One question. Ask it tonight. Ask it every time you feel something true and swallow it back down because the moment seems ordinary, or you are tired, or you tell yourself they already know. What am I waiting for? Not rhetorically. Concretely. What specific thing are you waiting for? A better moment, a special occasion for it to feel less exposing, less like standing on ice, because I promise you with 100 years behind that promise the better moment does not come on its own. You have to make it. You have to walk through the door before you take off your coat and say the true thing before you say anything else. I know what you are thinking. I thought it for 5 decades. You are thinking, they know. I show up, I stay, I provide. That is enough. That is the proof. It is not enough. Showing up is the floor, not the ceiling. It is the minimum requirement, not the declaration. The person you love does not need you to perform love for an audience, they need you to say it to them privately, specifically, in ordinary moments when nothing is at stake except the truth. You are also thinking, there is time. There will be a better moment and I will say it then. I thought that for 51 years. Margaret died on a Thursday morning in March. She did not wait for my better moment. Time moves at exactly the same speed regardless of whether you are ready, regardless of whether you have said what needs to be said. When did you last make her feel seen, not loved in the general sense? Not provided for. Seen. Specifically. By name. In ordinary light, on an ordinary evening, for no reason except that it was true and she was there and she deserved to hear it. When if you have to think for more than a moment, you already have your answer. There is a key hanging on a hook by my front door. It has been there for 11 years. It was hers, a spare key she carried in her purse and never needed because I was almost always home before her. After she died I found it in the small dish on her side of the dresser where she kept things she wanted, clothes. I put it on the hook by the door and I have not moved it since. Every morning I pass it on my way to the kitchen. Every morning I think about what she told me. About standing in the kitchen. About listening for the sound of a key in the door. This key, worn smooth at the edges, slightly bent at the top from some long-forgotten moment. She carried it for years. It meant home. It meant, I belong somewhere. Someone is there. I am still here. She is not. Somewhere in those 14 notebooks she wrote one line I have not been able to move past. She wrote it in 1987, 26 years before she died, 26 years before I sat beside her bed in the dark before dawn and held her hand while the light changed and changed and changed. I think he will understand me when there is no longer any time left to do anything about it. She knew. She knew me better than I knew myself, and she loved me anyway, and she waited, and she was right. Do not make her right about you. Go home. Say it now. The key is already in your hand.